The house, a desolate abode in the heart of Gunclar, harbored no signs of life. Only creeping moss and attic spiders inhabited its silent chambers. No laughter echoed within, and the big grey windows remained devoid of any flicker of light. It exuded a stillness and comfort akin to a grave. The only residents were the toads and bats from the surrounding woods, making it a lonely figure in the eerie darkness of deep Gunclar, on the edge of ghostly Barton. Though overshadowed by the nearby mythical Byron Manor, a home for the mentally ill, the dilapidated house held a quiet enchantment known only to those familiar with its history. Magic seeped into its foundations and permeated the surrounding soil like a creeping plague, casting a nauseating atmosphere. While most avoided it instinctively, rare souls, like mine, were drawn to its sorcery, yearning to be closer to that elusive spark of magic. Fortunately, purchasing the house proved effortless. The family that once owned it had long abandoned their claims, and the estate now belonged to the local parish council. They readily sold it to me, the last scion of a fading dynasty. The council had acquired the property under the condition that, in the absence of an heir, it would pass to them, and after 20 years, they could decide its fate. Had I not come forward, the house might have faced demolition. Money had changed hands to prevent its destruction, yet none was invested in its upkeep. For decades, the house stood alone, quietly deteriorating, trying to resist the encroaching wilderness. But now, it was to become mine, passing to my family after my death. If no one laid claim to it by then, I vowed to have it demolished, ensuring its sole ownership for eternity. To understand my peculiar choice of residence, a glimpse into my past behavior might shed light. I spent my entire childhood in the village of Barton, and despite leaving for education and life in Manchester, the memories of Barton lingered. It held both cherished and challenging moments. Summers running through abundant woods and navigating the crooked streets. My trips back to Barton were frequent, drawn by a peculiar magic that seemed to tether its inhabitants within its borders. During one such trip, I discovered the legendary haunted house in Gunner's Clough. Despite hearing about it since childhood, it wasn't until adulthood that I ventured into the woods, past the remnants of an old creek and peculiar pixie thrones. Finally, I stood before the house, captivated by its greasy grey windows and boarded-up door. It felt like a long-lost home, calling out to me with a half-remembered legend echoing in hushed whispers from the locals of Barton. My fascination with death and haunted houses, like many unconventional interests, traces back to early childhood experiences. Before turning 12, I bore witness to 2 family deaths that left lasting imprints on my psyche. First, I watched my grandmother succumb to alcohol consumption, witnessing her organs wither and fail. Shortly after, a close friend and cousin took his own life, handing himself in silence without a farewell or explanatory letter. By the age of 15, nightmares about my own demise haunted me, vividly portraying my death weekly, sometimes nightly. Despite their frequent occurrence, the details eluded me, fading with the clarity of waking consciousness. The place and time of my death remained elusive, but 2 recurring details persisted. I wouldn't die alone, and I wouldn't die hungry. My lifelong dream was to capture this nightmarish scene on canvas, given my penchant for artistry. However, the true essence of that final moment eluded me. A missing spark of clarity propelled me to discover it, unveiling the genuine motive behind purchasing the house, to serve as my muse, guiding me back to the days of the old town of Barton. Amidst rotting beams and a creaking sagging roof, I planned to live in solitude, drawing inspiration from the old magic as I penned my magnum opus, unraveling the mystery of what I believed to be my impending predestined death. From the outset, I resolved to do minimal work in the house. Its perfect decaying splendor was essential for enlightenment and fueling my creative imagination. After signing the necessary papers, I had to leave Barton for urgent matters in Manchester, entrusting Mr. Fisher, the solicitor, with a small list of chores during my absence. The house lacked electricity, but gas lighting sufficed, and plumbing, new doors, and locks were deemed necessary. Though a few windows needed replacing, I insisted on preserving as much original glass as possible, replacing only those that had fallen into disrepair. Mr. Fisher advised attention to the grounds. The wooden fence surrounding the main house was deteriorating, and the overgrown gardens blended with the woods behind them. Despite his suggestion, I insisted on leaving them untouched. The sparse engagements that kept me away from my cherished abode gradually wore thin on my patience, escalating my longing for the house to an unbearable fervor. With a feverish determination, I efficiently wrapped up my affairs in Manchester, enabling me to return to Barton earlier than initially planned. A visit to Mr. Fisher confirmed the completion of all requested tasks, prompting me to sign the final papers, collect the keys, and embark on the journey to Gunner's Clough with a restrained yet breathless joy. Two paths led to the house. The first, a faint trail branching off Elmwood Road, transformed into an overgrown forest road rarely traversed by anyone. This path guided me along a small bank, where a fern-covered stream lazily wound through the woods. From the bank, slippery and fungus-covered stone steps ascended haphazardly to the back garden of my new abode. The second route, more favorable to me, traversed Barton Parish Cemetery and led directly to Gun Clough in the back garden. This path wove through the trees, eventually unveiling the house after a considerable distance, becoming my preferred route. As I entered the armory at the far end of the cemetery, towering elms welcomed me. The autumn sun vanished quickly, the tangled branches muting the rays, casting everything into darkness. It's worth emphasizing the uncanny silence of the forest. No birds or insects disrupted the journey with their usual chirping or buzzing. I half imagined that the inhabitants of Gunner's Clough held a respectful silence, acknowledging a new master. Suddenly, the house emerged, and my pace quickened, not out of fear of the dark trees or the eerie forest silence, but out of sheer, unadulterated delight. I dropped my bags in awe, much like the child who first beheld the Titanic horror, frozen in admiration of the majestic beauty before me. Though the windows were boarded up, remnants of the original smoked glass made repairs barely noticeable. Like everything in the vicinity, the house exuded an aura of terror. I stood in silent ecstasy, unable to measure the passage of time until finally snapping out of my trance. Resuming my senses, I carried my bags to the front door. The large iron key from Mr. Fisher entered the lock with a fantastic and sinking clang. Turning it deliberately, I relished the sights and smells beyond the threshold. Anticipating a creaking door, I was surprised as it swung open smoothly and silently. Stepping forward, I immersed myself in the gloomy atmosphere, illuminated just enough to discern shapes without revealing intricate details, a feature I appreciated, allowing my imagination to conjure any kind of fantastic phantom. I half-danced my way through the hall, living room, kitchen, and other vacant rooms whose original purposes remained a mystery to me. Childhood fears and imaginary terrors unfolded like a grand spectacle, fanatical sounds and sights bursting forth from the depths of my subconsciousness. For a fleeting moment, I felt as if I were in Tartarus itself. Amidst this spectacle, one detail shattered the illusion, the overpowering musk of decay that engulfed my senses, yanking me back to the physical realm. The odor, simultaneously sweet and nauseating, was the unmistakable scent of death, pervading every inch of the house. My immediate conclusion pointed to an animal that might have entered and perished, leaving its decaying carcass concealed under the floorboards or in the attic. My search for the source proved futile, with no signs of the deceased creature anywhere, neither downstairs, in the upstairs bedrooms, nor in the small, cramped attic where the scent seemed most potent. While the search for the source remained inconclusive, it unveiled the horrifying glory of the aforementioned attic room. Despite the house's size, the attic was minuscule, with a low roof that compelled me to stoop down inside. To my horror, it was vacant and barren, devoid of relics from the house's past, offering only dust and dry cobwebs. The structure appeared uneven, beams leaning at odd angles, creating dizzying visual distortions. Sections of the roof curled inward and sharply curved outward without apparent reason, with unnecessary corners protruding from the beams. I felt trapped in an impossible trichotahedron, a mental hall of mirrors reflecting the unknowable laws of the universe. It seemed the original builder was either a genius or a madman. A decision crystallized in that moment. This was where I would write my masterpiece. In the shadows, beneath the faint light from a single round window looming menacingly overhead, I envisioned crafting my magnum opus. Despite the horrors my brain had feasted upon since my arrival, the desire to paint did not arise. Instead, I transported all my equipment into the attic, prepared for the black mood to seize me. As evening descended, I descended the stairs. I had yet to purchase a bed, and the decaying, rotting frame in the bedroom offered an unsuitable repose. Unpacking my suitcases, I arranged the essentials: painting tools, coffee, immediately set on the stove, and cigarettes. Simple groceries accompanied me: cheese, bread, and cold-cooked meat, consumed in my usual detached manner. Settling on a dusty couch with a sleeping bag from Manchester, I resigned myself to an early night, confronting the encroaching darkness. Hope lingered that the first day in the house would inspire the familiar nightmarish scene of death, its colors transferred to canvas in the morning with indescribable horror. However, the dream did not materialize, at least not in the anticipated form. Instead, an entirely new horror descended upon the midnight scene in consciousness, its curtains slowly opening as I gradually closed my eyes. I found myself navigating a labyrinth of earth tunnels, saturated with saltpeter and clammy to the touch. Aware of being underground but uncertain of the depth, I advanced through the winding corridors with a handheld flashlight, purposeless and adrift in the awaiting darkness. Gibberish sounds enveloped me, a blend of half-barking and hoarse voices emanating from an obscure origin. Struggling to discern the words, I caught fragments that shook me to the call. "He's here, shall we pop?" And "Hush, he's listening." Within my limited vision, grotesque figures flashed, fanged faces, and half-human eyes staring with bestial greed. Attempting to flee, I stumbled, anticipating the usual awakening from a dream-induced fall. Instead, my lamp shattered on impact, plunging me into instant darkness. Eyes, swollen and misshapen, surrounded me, their claws gripping me like iron vice grips, lifting my body from the floor. The scene abruptly shifted. In the attic now, I sat before a canvas, striving to decipher its depiction. A rumbling cacophony echoed beneath me, growing nearer. Panicking, I seized a paintbrush, desperately trying to complete my work. The attic hatch opened slowly, a platform forming at my feet, and those almost human eyes reappeared, staring at me with eerie lust. A scream escaped me, and then I woke up. Cold sweat covered me as I rolled on the couch. Glancing around, half expecting diabolical opponents, I found solitude. Sunlight flooded the living room, and checking my watch, I realized the morning had slipped away. It was 2:15 in the afternoon, and I had overslept. Despite the uncharacteristic sleepiness, I felt far from refreshed and could have slept longer if I lacked discipline. After making breakfast, I ventured into the back garden, lit a cigarette, and strolled through the brisk air, absorbing the views of the woods. Unlike my initial visit, Gunner's Clove now buzzed with activity, various animals contributing to a cacophony of joyful sounds. Finishing my cigarette, I retreated indoors, shielding myself from the cold. With no inclination to paint, I avoided the attic that day. My muscles ached from a restless night, and I roamed the house aimlessly, a lost soul seeking purpose. On my second round of the first-floor rooms, I noted the absence of the putrid odor from the previous day, a change that brought a sense of relief. Perhaps a scavenger had removed the source during the night. As the day unfolded and coffee and cigarettes became my companions, I decided to grab a bite of sandwiches and spend the remaining hours in Barton Village. Barton boasted a modest library, lacking in academic volumes, but compensating with an abundance of local history and folklore, a perfect resource for my quest. With the assistance of a stern librarian entrenched in the library for as long as my memory served, I uncovered meager details about the house in the woods and its former occupants. In a book titled The Contract of Demonic Influence in Cheshire by Eastwich author Samuel Gaunt, I stumbled upon a vague reference to a man named Jonathan Bickham, who once dwelled in a house known simply as Elmwood House. According to the librarian, Bickham fled Barton around 120 years ago, when it was revealed that he possessed a collection of forbidden books banned by the church of that era. The most ominous of these tomes was Les Cultes des Ghouls, The Cults of the Ghouls, a book with which I was somewhat familiar, having heard of it during my university days, always spoken of in hushed tones. My interest heightened due to the shared Saxon ancestry in the names Bickham and my own Pickman. Although details about the unsettling folio were scarce, I concentrated on tracing the Bickham lineage. With the remaining daylight, I delved into every reference to the Bickham family and their history. The family had built and owned the house I now inhabited for generations, but had vacated it long before my birth. This cursed lineage, either relinquishing or leaving it behind upon demise, intrigued me. Little was known about the Bickham family's fate. Hints suggested the last member died without an heir, while others mentioned their migration to New England years ago. The family's destiny seemed elusive, but I paid it little mind. The house was now mine, and that was all that mattered. Abandoning my uneaten sandwiches, I tossed them into the nearest hedge as I traversed the crooked streets of Barton, bathed in the surreal hues of the fading sun. The village, cast in orange and pink shades, transformed even the most ordinary objects into unsettling spectacles. Opening the gate onto the trail of corpses, I embraced the unique opportunity to continue exploring. Rows of weathered tombstones presented a different kind of library, and I fervently sought the name Bickham among them. However, my search concluded in disappointment. No tombstone bore the name I sought. Dejected and disheartened, I returned home. Navigating the darkening forest path, I noted the eerie absence of animal sounds. While expected, given the likelihood of daytime creatures retiring, the oppressive silence haunted my journey home. In the living room, I ignited the gas lamps, immersing myself in the gloomy ambience that had become my nightly refuge. The sun had vanished, granting the stars and moon dominion over the darkened earth. Though I had intended to pen a letter to a scholarly friend in Manchester regarding Les Cultes des Ghouls, a sudden wave of apathy overcame me as I took up my pen, leaving me drowsy and languid. Once more, I found myself in the dimly lit tunnels, this time clutching a half-extinguished candle instead of a lamp. The underground depth seemed to increase, and I aimlessly navigated through the maze, occasionally stumbling over rocks and debris, sending shivers down my spine. The tunnel expanded, leading to a vast, almost square chamber adorned with rows of long wooden coffins. In the darkness, I discerned numerous eerie cradles, some open and scattered, others haphazardly stacked. For the first time in my nightmarish visions, the reality of the situation dawned on me. This was not a dream. As the realization struck, an inaudible and thankfully unintelligible whisper reached my ear from behind. The acrid breath on my neck prompted a sudden lift, transporting me once again to the isolated expanse of the upstairs attic. Crouched in front of the canvas, I strained to discern the painting. Leaving the house, I made my way towards the parish church, hoping to find its priest and uncover the mystery of the absent Bickham graves in the cemetery. Luck was on my side as I stumbled upon him near the woods, engrossed in his work beside an intriguingly worn headstone wrapped in a web of lush green ivy. Not wanting to startle him, I coughed to announce my presence. Introductions followed, revealing the Reverend Stephen Spencer as his name. However, his disinterest in conversation was evident. Cutting to the chase, I inquired about the absence of Bickham family members in the cemetery despite their long local lineage. In a detached manner, Reverend Spencer explained that the Bickhams had received special permission to bury their dead on their property. He suggested a family tomb or crypt at Armory Clun, cautioning about exposed coffins due to a past flood. As I thanked him for the information, he dismissed it with an agitated wave. Recognizing a kindred spirit in Reverend Spencer's demeanor, I left him be and turned my attention elsewhere. After posting a letter to my Manchester colleague, I embarked on a forest exploration in Gunner's Clough. Uncertain of the mausoleum's location, I relied on the Reverend's account of exposed graves and assumed it would be near the sloping wooded banks. The boundary between garden and woodland proved elusive as I navigated thickets and nettles, enduring pricks from unwanted weeds. Pushing through the dense foliage, I eventually spotted my goal, a clearing with withered elms forming a perfect circle, the resting place of the departed Bickmans. Entering the ring of leafy sentinels, I observed brown leaves swirling in the clearing, stirred by a cool breeze. The moss-covered stone exuded an aged charm, and the Roman-like columns adorned the corroded metal entrance. Two vases, hosting foul-smelling water and pesky insects, stood before the columns. Flies, an odd presence for the season, buzzed around, fueled by their insatiable appetite. Yet, my purpose went beyond the invertebrates feasting on death. Ignoring the stagnant bowls, I ascended the steps to the tomb's entrance. The door swung open with minimal resistance, almost detaching from its hinges due to centuries of decay and rust. The interior held little surprise. Shells carved into the walls once cradled the deceased, but only a few rotting coffins remained. Yielding to curiosity, I lifted the lid of the most preserved coffin, expecting grinning skulls or bone fragments. To my astonishment, the contents were neither gruesome nor ordinary. They were simultaneously harmless and horrifying. The coffin cradled a mass of stones and bricks, arranged deliberately and too deliberately to be a mistake or accident. A quick examination of other coffins revealed the same cold slabs of stone within. Leaning against the mausoleum's inner wall, I pondered an explanation, and just as a fantastical idea began forming in the dark recesses of my mind, I noticed something overlooked. An inconspicuous door on the floor. A stone hatch with a thick rusted ring lay at the tomb's back, partially buried beneath rocks, debris, and layers of dust. Despite the scarce light within, I discerned the outline of this hidden entrance. Eagerly, I cleared the sediment away, revealing a trapdoor obstructed by age. Though resistant, the rusted ring yielded to my determined pull, unveiling its clandestine secret. Upon lifting the lid, I confronted a slender cast-iron ladder, bolted to the cavity's side, descending into the abyss below. Lamenting the absence of a light source, I recalled the matches in my trouser pocket. Striking one against the stone floor, I hesitated, acknowledging its limited glow. A more sensible mind would have returned for a lantern, but driven by curiosity, I pressed on. Descending the ladder, surprisingly sturdy for its age, it rattled with a hollow metallic sound. The journey seemed longer than expected, and the entrance above appeared uncomfortably distant when I reached the bottom. With my match extinguished, I lit another and cautiously ventured forward. A damp and musty tunnel greeted me, its walls possessing a slick, natural appearance despite being man-made. No sconces lined the brown walls for candles or lanterns, prompting curses as each match quickly burnt out. Having covered about 20 yards, the tunnel branched into a crossroads, offering 3 new routes. Opting for the straightforward path to minimize the risk of getting lost, I discovered something crunchy underfoot. Startled, I dropped my match, prompting me to light another to examine the disturbance. In the semi-useful glow, I identified broken glass on the ground, my shattered lamp from a recent insane dream. Panic seized me as I picked up the shards, grappling with the disconcerting possibility. How could this be? As I wavered between rationality and insanity, a sudden awareness of a presence behind me froze my movements. Though awake, I closed my eyes in desperate hope for error. A shuffling noise approached, and as it drew near, I squinted, praying for release from this nightmare. Cold hands gently rested on my shoulders, causing a visceral reaction, and without hesitation, I sprinted into the darkness. Somewhere ahead, I stumbled and crashed to the ground, the enveloping darkness welcoming an unconscious retreat. As I awoke on the couch, darkness had already descended. Small cuts adorned my forehead, remnants of a probable impact during my unconscious stint on the tunnel floor. Examining my reflection in a pocket mirror, I noticed blood from the forehead cuts and muddy feet, perplexed about my journey home. Blood and mud were the only tangible threads connecting the dreamlike experience to reality, preventing me from remaining oblivious to the horror that had gripped me. Gaining composure, I rose, intending to clear the fog in my brain with a cup of coffee. Touching my injured eyebrow, a sharp wrinkle of my nose ensued, and then the stench hit me, an odor akin to the one that had assailed me upon entering the house days ago. A nauseating, intrusive smell permeated my senses. Room by room, I searched for the source, only to be disheartened by the revelation that the foul odor emanated from my own mouth. I reached up and swept my tongue across my teeth, discovering bits of something repulsive lodged between them. Despite not having eaten for hours, the disturbing discovery puzzled me. Returning to the couch, I picked up my pocket mirror, realizing the room had darkened significantly. Tilting the mirror against the candle's light, I scrutinized the foreign object in my mouth, a brown, stretchy substance hanging loosely from my front teeth. Pulling it forward with my index finger and thumb, I gagged at the vile smell, reminiscent of decomposed bird flesh. Racing to the front door for fresh air, I swung it open, unleashing the contents of my stomach onto the steps. Instant relief washed over me, but I couldn't bring myself to inspect the expelled material, collapsing in the doorway. The outside darkness hinted at either early morning or deep night, leaving me uncertain. Fumbling in the doorway, my hand grasped something, and I instinctively picked it up, a letter. Mumbling to myself about the rarity of receiving letters, I speculated it was from Mr. Fisher. However, upon opening the envelope, I discovered it was a response from a friend in Manchester, dated several days after my supposed letter. Disbelief and confusion engulfed me, prompting a meticulous reading of the letter's contents, which took multiple readings to grasp fully. Martin, it's a rarity to hear from you, and now you want me to dig into your family history. Either your focus is solely on painting, or you've developed a taste for laziness. Regardless, being the dutiful servant, I fulfilled your request. Concerning Les Cultes des Ghouls, yes, it's on the radar, known as a black magic tome penned by François-Honoré Balfour, also known as Count de Lette, in the early 18th century. The book delves into an underground cult supposedly devoted to ghouls, half-human, half-cannibal entities honoring ancient, ominous deities. Balfour, who allegedly encountered this cult, vanished, possibly fleeing to England or Italy under a different name. Your inquiry about the Bickham surname is intriguing, given that you, yourself, are a descendant of that lineage. Originating from Cheshire, some later migrated to Massachusetts, spurred by accusations of witchcraft. Those who settled in America adopted the name Pickmans, forming the basis of your family tree, before returning to Britain and reclaiming the Bickham surname. The final bearer of the Bickham/Pickman name in Cheshire was Nathan Bickham, residing in a house now under your ownership, a detail you're likely aware of, unless your obsession with the house developed independently of your family tree knowledge. Quite fascinating. Your sensitivity shines through, eagerly anticipating your next masterpiece. On a side note, Haywood is flaunting the painting you sold him all over Manchester, attracting offers double and triple what he paid. Your ego might inflate knowing he's displayed it alongside his prized possession, The Lesson, a grotesque and perverse masterpiece of mysterious origin. Hope your artistic endeavors are thriving. A visit is overdue. Let's plan one when time allows. Yours, E.D. I crumpled the letter, tossing it aside as the full horror of what lay ahead sank in. The paint stains on my hands only confirmed my suspicions. The painting was complete, crafted in a twisted state of sleepwalking that had haunted me since my arrival at Elmwood House. Guided by the spectral lords of the night, the former visages of the Bickham family, I had unknowingly brought their dark vision to life. Now, in the eerie twilight, the dying candles flicker, casting shadows across the attic. I gaze at the finished canvas, the painted figures almost stirring to life in the growing darkness. A multitude of naked corpses with pallid flesh, intertwined in a peak of madness and decay, topped by my own likeness. Holding a piece of meat in my hands, my face reflects unbridled lust. Below, I hear the rumbling and tearing, the horde coming for me, seeking to claim one of their own. This is how I will meet my end, as I always knew I would. Yet, amid this horrifying truth, one detail remains elusive. They are here to compel me into the final act, securing my place among their immortal ranks until the stars extinguish, and the elders roam the dark corners of the human realm once more. As the end draws near, and I peer at the lifeless flesh in my hands, uncertainty lingers. Will I lick my lips with glee, as depicted in the painting? Or will my frail body become a feast for those vile dwellers, slowly opening the attic door beneath the timeless Elmwood House, the dwelling in the woods, the sanctuary of the dead gods?